How much crit rate or crit damage do you really need? This is the age-old question generally across all Hoyo vs games, as long as the character in question is a damage dealer. This is a really important question though, especially since critical hit damage scales exponentially, meaning more crit damage equals higher damage overall. Unlike other stats, such as attack, which has diminishing returns the more the stat goes. But before that, let me explain the differences between crit rate and crit damage first. Basically, crit rate refers to the probability of a critical hit. The higher it is, the more likely you are able to score a critical hit, with a maximum at 100%. Any more than 100% is redundant. Of course, you want this crit rate to be as high as possible so that you can crit more often. Crit damage refers to how much extra damage you will do when you score a critical hit. You'd also want this to be as high as possible so that you can deal higher crit damage. In the ideal scenario, you'd want both as high as possible, but due to artifact rolling RNG, weapon RNG, and resource limitations, you may not be able to get both to extremely high levels. So, in essence, the rule of the game is always finding that balance between crit rate and crit damage. What is the threshold that you would be comfortable with? After all, if you have too much crit rate and not enough crit damage, you won't be able to deal as much damage. The inverse is also true. Too little crit rate and too much crit damage is also bad, since you may not be able to crit as much to capitalize on the high crit damage. Hence, the general rule of thumb is to have the crit rate and crit damage at a 1:2 ratio. Basically, if you have a 50% crit rate, you want at least 100% crit damage. But personally, I don't really like this concept as much. For example, if I were to have 50% crit rate to 100 crit damage, I will feel that 50% crit rate is still not high enough to ensure more crit. 100% crit damage can't really net me enough damage. My personal criteria is always to go for at least 60% or more crit rate so that the chance of critting is more in my favor than a 50-50. As for crit damage, I want more damage naturally, so I'm more comfortable with a crit damage higher than 180%. This is of course my personal criteria, but somewhat like investment, it depends on your risk profile. If you're risk averse and you'd rather crit more, maybe 70 to 80% crit rate and a 160% crit damage is safe for you. If you have a higher risk appetite, 55% crit rate and a 200 crit damage can even be possible. That said, this is still primarily affected by the character's ascension stats, best artifacts and weapons, which makes some characters easier to build than others. For instance, Moalani gets 24.2% crit rate when she ascends to level 90, and the artifact Obsidian Codex gives a 40% additional crit rate when she uses a Night Soul Burst. In that case, she already gets 64.2% crit rate automatically, so you might want to focus more on crit damage, giving her artifacts such as the crit damage goblet. Personally, I gave my Moalani extra 20% crit rate on top of the 64.2% because of the nature of a kit where she only attacks the enemy at the end of her rotation. So, all the more you want her to crit on that. For another character like say Raiden, who gains up to 32% additional ER on Ascension, gains more ER with a signature weapon, and has an artifact that doesn't really provide any crit, it becomes very difficult to get a high crit rate and crit damage. So I settled with about 55% crit rate and 150% crit damage, so that, I can at least crit somewhat reasonably and get some good damage. Finally, your own artifact RNG also matters a lot. If you somehow get a lot of crit damage main stats and substat artifacts, perhaps you might want to farm for more crit rate substats or crit rate circlet. Same for the other way around. To summarize, it is difficult to ask exactly how much crit rate or crit damage you need, since it differs between person to person, account to account, and heavily depends on your RNG and so many other different factors. Hence, find your own personal balance and threshold, stick with it, and try to reach that as much as possible with what RNG the game throws at you. With that, we've come to the end of today's video. What do you think? What is your crit rate crit damage threshold? Do let me know down in the comment section below. If you have made it this far, do consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't, as it will really help out this small channel to get to its next goal of 10,000 subscribers. Thank you so much and see you soon! If you'd like to see which standard banner character is the most worth it to build, please click the video on the right. If you'd like to see my other Genshin Impact videos, please click the playlist on the left. Once again, thank you so much for watching and see you again next time. Bye bye!